Hello, thank you for listening. My name is Thomas Atkinson, but everyone always called me Tommy. I want to tell you a story from a time when I was just 24 years old. A lifetime ago, really. Before the war, my world was simple. It was loud, but it was an orderly loud. It smelled of hot oil and steel filings, the scent of purpose. I was a factory worker in Manchester, you see. I maintained the big weaving looms. Intricate things, thousands of moving parts. A single gear with a chipped tooth, a single shuttle off by a hair's breadth, and the whole tapestry turns to ruin. My job was to see the small things, to listen for the wrong rhythm, to feel the wrong vibration through the soles of my boots. I believed with all the certainty of youth that any problem, any machine could be understood, it could be diagnosed, and it could be fixed. The war taught me that some machines are designed only to break things. And sometimes, the only way to fix a problem is to become a breaker of machines yourself. People ask what it was like that summer of '44 in France. They imagine grand charges and waving flags. But for me, in that swirling hell of dust and iron they called the Falaise Gap, it wasn't about any grand design. It started, as most things did back then, with the deafening sound of a machine coming apart at the seams. The air in Normandy that August was thick enough to chew. It was a foul stew of diesel fumes, churned earth, and something else, something sweet and cloying that turned your stomach. The smell of death, unburied and baking in the sun. We'd been pushing for days, the whole world a blur of hedgerows and shattered villages. Our unit, the 1st Norfolks, was part of the hammer trying to close the door on the German 7th Army. It wasn't a battle line. It was a meat grinder, a pocket, they called it. To me, it felt like a giant, broken-down engine, shuddering and screaming as it tore itself to pieces. And we were just small cogs caught in the grinding gears. I was perched in the loft of a half-demolished farmhouse. The slate roof was gone, peeled back by a shell, leaving the rafters exposed like the ribs of a skeleton. It gave me a perfect view of the valley below, a ruinous tapestry of burning half-tracks, dead cattle, and the frantic, scuttling movements of men. My Lee Enfield No. 4, the T model, rested on a shattered timber. It was a beautiful machine, simple, reliable, each part milled to perfection. I knew its every secret. The precise pressure needed on the trigger for a clean break, the satisfyingly solid clack asterisk of the bolt cycling a new round. It was a piece of my old world, a tool I understood in a place that made no sense. My job was simple: watch, report, and if a target of opportunity presented itself, to make it stop working. Patience was the main gear in my mechanism. The factory had taught me that. You don't rush a diagnosis. You watch, you listen, you wait for the machine to show you where it's broken. The world outside was anything but patient. The noise was constant, a physical pressure on your eardrums. The distant rolling thunder of the big guns, the sharp, spiteful crack of rifles, and the incessant, ripping canvas sound of the German machine guns, the MG-42s. We called them Hitler's buzzsaw, a fitting name. A tool designed for dismemberment. Then the world turned white. It wasn't a bang, not at first. It was a punch. A giant, invisible fist of compressed air that threw me from my perch. My ears screamed with a high, pure tone, like a tuning fork struck against my skull. Dust and plaster rained down, thick and choking. It reminded me of home, of the Blitz. That same gritty, acrid taste of pulverized brick and shattered lives. I lay there for a moment, my thoughts stripped gears grinding uselessly. The shell had hit the barn next to me. A direct hit. I could hear the screams, but they were distant, underwater sounds, filtered through the ringing in my head. I scrambled back to the opening, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Below, where my platoon had been setting up a Vickers gun, there was just a crater, smoke, fire, and pieces. My machine, my little part of the larger army machine, had been shattered. I was alone, a disconnected part, useless. Panic is a strange thing. It's like pouring sand into an engine. Everything seizes up. My breath hitched, my hands shook, my vision, my most precious tool, swam with black spots. I squeezed my eyes shut, terrified. The fear I carried with me every day, the quiet, gnawing terror that my sight would go, that the strain would be too much and I'd be left blind and helpless. It was right there, suffocating me. I would be a burden, a broken part to be discarded. Get a grip, Atkinson, I muttered, the words tasting like brick dust. Diagnose the problem. The problem was I was cut off. The problem was the ringing in my ears was slowly subsiding, being replaced by a new sound. The rumble of engines, German engines. From the woods to the east, where they weren't supposed to be, a column was emerging, not a retreat, an attack. A Panzer IV, ugly and square, leading a half-dozen half-tracks spitting infantry. A counterattack, they were trying to force the gap back open, right through the hole they'd just blown in our line, right through me. My rifle felt like a child's toy. I could maybe pick off a few, but it would be like throwing a spanner into a locomotive. I needed artillery. I needed the big guns, our guns, the 25-pounders miles back. They were the factory's giant hydraulic press, the only tool that could crush this. I scrabbled for the radio Sergeant Miller had left with me. A number 38 set, a clumsy, heavy box, another machine. I fumbled with the headset, the ringing in my ears making the static an agony. I pressed the transmit button. Sunray Minor, this is Acorn 2. Do you read? Over, nothing but static, a roar of empty noise. My heart sank. The wire to the main aerial must have been cut by the blast. Sunray Minor, this is Acorn 2. Anyone, do you read me? Over. Desperation was making my voice crack. The German column was getting closer, moving with terrifying purpose. I could see the faces of the men in the half-tracks now, grim, determined masks of sweat and dirt. A voice crackled back, faint, buried in the static. Orn 2, say again, breaking up. It was like listening to a machine on its last legs, a death rattle of failing parts. Artillery, I need artillery. Enemy armor and infantry, grid. I stopped. I didn't know the exact grid. We'd moved too fast. Giving them the wrong grid would be worse than nothing. It would kill our own lads. The voice came back a little clearer. Cannot fire blind, need correction, of course. They needed an observer. They needed my eyes. But I couldn't give them a number. The machine was asking for a specific input, and I didn't have it. The Panzer's cannon fired, a hollow asterisk boom that echoed in my bones. It was aiming down the road towards where our main force would be. I had to improvise. My factory mind, the part of me that understood systems, took over. I couldn't give them the perfect technical schematic, but I could describe the fault. I could guide the tool. Listen to me, I said, my voice steady now, the panic burned away by purpose. Forget the grid, I am your eyes. Do you see the burning barn on the ridge, the one I'm in? A pause. Affirmative, Acorn, we see the smoke. Good. From my position, the lead Panzer is at 10 o'clock. Range 800 yards. It's moving along the dirt track towards the crossroads. Put one shell there, just one, for ranging. Over, I spoke like I was guiding a crane operator in the factory. Calm, precise, breaking the complex problem down into simple, manageable steps. The next few minutes were the longest of my life. I watched the Panzer, a deadly insect crawling across the landscape. My world narrowed to the eyepiece of my scope. My vision had to be perfect. Every detail mattered. The speed of the vehicle, the direction of the wind tugging at the grass. Then the sky screamed. A single shell landed with a deafening crump asterisk, 100 yards long and to the right. A pillar of black earth erupted, close but not close enough. The Germans barely slowed. Shot over, I snapped into the radio. Drop 200, left 100, like turning a spanner a quarter turn left. Fire for effect, all guns, fire now. I prayed they understood my clumsy, mechanical language. I prayed they trusted the ghost in the ruined barn. The world held its breath, and then the world ended. It wasn't one scream, but a dozen, 100, all at once. The air ripped apart. The ground shook so violently I thought the farmhouse would finally collapse. It wasn't a series of explosions. It was one continuous, rolling cataclysm of fire and steel. The 25-pounders were walking their shells right down the dirt track. It was beautiful and it was monstrous. The lead Panzer brewed up instantly, a geyser of orange flame vomiting from its turret. A half-track behind it disintegrated, just gone. Men were jumping from the surviving vehicles, running, screaming, burning. The artillery was a relentless, methodical force. It wasn't angry. It was just a machine doing its job. The job of breaking things. I watched through my scope, my eye pressed to the cold metal, my factory training forcing me to observe, to analyze the result. It was a complete success. The counterattack was shattered. The machine was broken. The shelling stopped as suddenly as it began. The silence that fell was heavier, more profound than any noise. It was a dead silence, filled only by the crackle of flames and the distant, thin screams of a dying man. The air tasted of cordite and cooked meat. I lowered the rifle, my arms trembling from the strain. I looked out over the valley at the carnage I had directed, the black, twisted skeletons of vehicles. The dark shapes scattered on the ground that weren't shadows. Tommy Atkinson, the boy who fixed looms, had become a maestro of destruction. I hadn't used a spanner or a gauge. I had used my eyes, a broken radio, and 100 tons of high explosives. I felt a wave of nausea. I leaned my head against the splintered timber, the rough wood digging into my forehead, and I was sick. I spent the rest of my life working with machines, went back to the factory after the war. The familiar smell of oil and steel was a comfort, but I never again believed that everything could be fixed. Some things, some people, some countries, they break in ways that you can't put back together. The war wasn't a machine you could repair. It was a machine designed to take perfect things, boys from Manchester, farmers from Normandy, cities, families, and smash them into pieces that no longer fit. You can't fix that. You can only mourn the machine they were supposed to be. The hardest lesson is this. You spend your life learning how to build things, how to make them work, how to put them right. But in a moment of true chaos, all that knowledge is turned on its head. You aren't asked to fix the problem. You're asked to become a more efficient part of the breaking. You don't choose between right and wrong. You just choose the tool that will end the noise quickest, and you spend the rest of your life trying to forget the sound it made. This memory is a piece of shrapnel I carry. It's heavy. Help me carry it. Subscribe and ensure these stories are never left to rust in silence.